Welcome to the very first edition of MTL's own video news magazine program. Over the next half hour, we'll be reporting on a wide range of issues that concern the company. As the shakeout in the bus industry continues, we'll have an overview of the direction taken by the MTL management team. As the big groups get bigger, they want to send MTL to the top of the league. If it's a question of survival of the fittest, just who is the fittest fitter? Stand by to absorb the shock. That's all coming up later, but first, let's meet the program host, Bob Greaves.
Hello, before I set off on this first journey round your company, I'd like to thank those of you who've already helped produce material for this broadcast. And in the months ahead, we'll be bringing you MTL news and views from all over the UK. And nobody's going to get shortchanged if you've got a reasonable point to make, however controversial. But before that we get going, there are two observations I'd like to offer to you.
We're all here to earn money, as long as they don't give the drivers in Liverpool more than what they give us.
Management that knows exactly what it's all about, basically, right? Managements that know what it's like on the ground, not talking about things that they don't know about. When they were behind the wheel 20 years ago and it's all different now, out there, totally different.
Those warnings come from the staff of two new teams who are helping MTL establish itself amongst the leaders in the public transport industry. London Northern's problems are different from their colleagues in Liverpool, Manchester and elsewhere, but not in the way you might have expected.
As far as the MTL staff are concerned, evidence of the north-south divide is clear from the way the government decided on how privatisation would take place. In the capital, bus operations are still regulated, and bus operators have to meet the strict requirements set by London Transport. But while MTL staff at Holloway, for example, may not face the free-for-all on the roads experienced by their Liverpool colleagues, the survival of the business in London depends on them winning tenders for services against stiff competition from other companies. And if Liverpool drivers think that the gyratory is busy, they should spare a thought for their London colleagues who have to make their way through the capital streets in the rush hour. Against this backdrop of massive traffic congestion, London drivers still have to provide a quality service that meets London transport requirements or risk having routes taken away from them.
262W5s, no, it's cut out on Highgate Hill. Engineers are going out to it. Much obliged, roll out.
Life might appear somewhat easier for drivers based in leafy Potters Bar, the other London Northern depot. It's much further out of the city for a start, but the fight is just as fierce to provide a quality service and win tenders on the basis of price. Martin Fisher, operations manager, explains.
Apart from 3 routes that are operated commercially by London Northern, that is, if they don't make money, then we don't run the route. All routes are operated as contracts to London Transport. They set very high standards. We have to operate 98% of our route as a minimum. That includes traffic loss mileage, but the actual main standard is 98.5% of the mileage, which has to be operated so that we can't lose mechanical loss mileage or staff loss mileage. They also expect us to run on time, so all routes are expected to run to a standard of 65% of the route running on time. That is up to 5 minutes late or 3 minutes early. Anything worse than that, then we would be penalised and we could lose routes. Buses are expected to be clean, they're expected not to have any graffiti, and they also check us for the fares that we collect. If fares aren't collected on their behalf, we get penalties, which are actually approximately 100 times the fare that isn't collected. So there are very high standards. If we fail to meet those standards, then the route could be taken away from us and offered to tender to other operators. We're expecting to win some more tenders from other routes. We expect to expand into areas that we haven't gone into, either to the east or the west of us, or even to the south of us. You know, we are looking to win more tenders. The whole object of being in business as a bus operator in London is to expand. Obviously, the competition will be very high with the other operators around us, but provided we provide the quality and also a competitive price, we should win more tenders and expand.
So how do staff at both garages feel about MTL's purchase of London Northern?
There has been a change since the company's been taken over by MTL. They seem to want to do well. That's the impression I get. And so far, things look good. So far.
Yeah, it's better than I thought it'd be.
Yeah, everybody was worrying about nothing.
But I mean, like, it's, everyone thinks that their finances are going to change and everything. But it's been okay so far. Touch wood.
It's been, I don't know, it hasn't been long enough, really, has it? Nothing's changed. I mean, really, everything's the same. Nothing's changed. I mean, when you make changes, then come and ask me.
Well, optimistic up to now. It looks good, but we'll have to wait and see, won't it?
Favourable at the moment, yeah. Quite impressed so far. It seems quite good. A lot of changes, which was expected. Okay.
Managing Director Dominic Brady works closely with his operations manager Jim Locker in organising and coordinating the new venture.
I think one of the obvious differences that you see just by looking out of the window of offices like this is the congestion. We found in Liverpool drivers' representatives, and quite rightly have said that driving buses at the moment is particularly stressful. Traffic's getting more congestion, packed out with cars. Car ownership's gone up, and that's an argument which stands up in Liverpool. When you actually look at the problems facing drivers in London, and the traffic problems plus the need to run to time, run a quality service, then there are, I think I'd argue, far more problems, and it's potentially a far more difficult job driving a bus in London than it is in Liverpool. There's been a good positive response from everyone in the company since we've come down here. There's a lot of good people. I think what gives me hope for the future is there's a lot of people who want to win. There's almost a bit of the Merseyside mentality that we want to have the best bus company in London, and the vast majority of the workforce are behind us in that. Relationships are good. Morale's not too bad. And we get on well. If we can run our buses to time, if we can run with a reasonable quality level, if we can actually keep maintaining our position and winning one or two new tenders, if we can try and expand the business in other parts of London, then there is every chance that we will build a successful business, and the staff in London will be able to share in the benefits that will come from that, in the pay, and maybe hopefully one day in the future through being able to participate in these share schemes.
While Dominic Brady reviews the tactics needed to secure London, MTL's chairman and managing director Peter Coombs is thinking through the company's overall strategy for the future.
Well, as I say, we're in this group of about 3 companies at around £100 million turnover. But we're behind the 3 companies at, say, 200 million, and we're behind Stagecoach at nearly 400 million. And if you look ahead over the next, and it's happening by the week rather than by the month almost at the moment, I expect further mergers and amalgamations and sales particularly between the bigger companies. Our strategy is to make ourselves strong enough to be able to determine our own future, and by strong enough I mean both financially strong enough and big enough. We've got to be big in size terms, but you've also got to be financially strong as well. If you actually want to retain control of your own future, as we want to do for certainly the next 3 years, until this covenant comes off, the covenant which means that if we sell on, most of any gain would go back to the PTA in terms of the agreement through which we bought the company. We want to be able to determine our own future and keep our options open to that point. At that point, I'm certain that offers will be made for our shares from one or more of those companies. And it'll be up to shareholders to decide whether they want to realise the value of their shares at that point and accept that offer. As an alternative, we can consider flotation, which is in effect another way of having the option to sell shares. And that could be an option, and depending on the circumstances at the time, and I actually mean the market circumstances at the time, that may be a better opportunity to realise the value of people's shares, or it may not be. Or of course there's a third broad option which says no, we like it as it is and we'll stay that way. But in those circumstances, if we remain a private company, people will not be able to realise anything like the full value of their shares, and we'll have to make sure that we continue to be sufficiently strong, that means big enough and financially strong enough, to actually be able to, well, retain control of our own company.
MTL has grown substantially since it was bought by its employees, increasing the pressure on its rivals who threatened its survival. Back in 1986, the government's conviction that the public sector bus industry was heavily subsidised led to a massive shakedown. Opinion about the methods used still vary, and the subject will undoubtedly dominate the UK political agenda for some time. For the moment, it's a battle for survival. In the UK, the conflict is not just about becoming bigger and better, it's about becoming smarter. The public transport issue is coming to dominate political thinking throughout Europe. The increasing number of private cars is causing untold damage to the environment. The cost of road building and maintenance is getting out of control. Last year, a smart bus system was introduced in Liverpool to provide EC transport specialists with some answers. Buses hydraulically kneel to allow easy access for the elderly, disabled, or mums and dads with children in tow. Real-time information keeps waiting passengers fully informed of when the next bus will arrive. To survive, MTL needs to grow, and it can do that by acquisition, buying up companies such as London Northern and making them more profitable. Organic growth. More passengers are persuaded to use existing services. Peter Coombs again.
I've said that the company has to be competitive, because all companies that survive have got to be competitive. You've got to be one of the big sharks. You've got to be one of the leaders in the Premier Division. Otherwise, there's no survival, in which case I think all employees can only suffer from those circumstances. So you've got to be competitive. If you're competitive and you're deemed to be successful, what does that mean? It means that we will be a growing company, we'll be financially strong. Above all, I think, if we look forward, we'll be offering a real quality service in all the areas in which we operate. I think, in general, at the moment, it would be very difficult to be anything other than thoroughly ashamed of the quality of service that we offer at the moment. I mean ashamed. Now, in a sense, that's not anybody's fault. Deregulation hit the industry as a whole very hard. Our buses are extremely old. I mean, it's an absolute disgrace that people didn't invest in this company from 1980 onwards. We've got an enormous backlog to overcome. We've invested more in buses in the last 2 years, actually since we were privatised, than we invested in the previous 12 years. Much more, in fact, over twice as much. Now, in order to provide that service, we've got to overcome those investment deficiencies, and it's beginning to happen. You know, you've seen the new buses. I think more important than that, though, it's not, a quality service is not just about the infrastructure, it's not just about the buses, it's not just about much improved ticketing, it's not about providing information to people, which is very deficient at the moment. It's also about the attitude of not just the driver, but every single person in the company. And I recognise, incidentally, that that's crucially connected with morale. Now, we have to get to a situation where the quality of service we provide is something that we can be really proud of, and that pride will be reinforced by the recognition it gets from our customers and from everybody in the communities in which we operate.
There's no future for a bus company that doesn't improve the quality of its service. Passengers just won't stand for it. In fact, higher quality can improve the number of passengers. This in turn leads to greater job satisfaction and security. Improvements in the quality of service are a top priority throughout the company. In Southport, it's already paying dividends.
The quality improvements that we've carried out here started just about a year ago, when we started to involve the employees in a series of discussion days to try and look forward to the future and create their vision of the future. People take public transport for granted. If you go outside of Southport and look at the way vehicles are presented anywhere else, there's a tremendous difference, there's a tremendous step in quality. And I think, personally, that this is the way to go for the future, and I want this to be the model for the rest of the organisation. And I think we can get better. I think we can make a better job. I believe that passengers will say about Southport and District buses that we have our own bus service. They believe that they own it, because when we relaunch the product at Southport and District. We actually put the Southport crest on the side of the vehicles, which was only a small step, but the people responded really positively on that. We got our old Southport Corporation back, and that local identity is very, very important, and the people do feel that it's their bus service.
Very good. Improvement, actually.
I think they're doing quite well, considering the volume of traffic that we have here.
Much better. The drivers are very more courteous and it's more reliable.
Quite good. The only thing is the new ones, they seem to slope as you come down. And for us olders, it's a bit, it's like on the cakewalk.
Very good service. Very good service. They're regular, they come on time, they're clean, and the drivers are very good.
Oh, I think it's very good. It is on this route where we are.
Southport may lead the way in terms of quality improvements, but one reason for that is the investment made by the company. A third of the Southport fleet has been replaced by new vehicles in the last year alone. Investment and expansion costs money, big money.
To acquire London Northern, for example, MTL went out and borrowed £20 million from financial institutions who'd been impressed by the company's achievements in recent years. Not bad for a company which is owned by the people who work for it. But if that progress is to continue, do the present share arrangements need reviewing? And if this is an employee-owned company, how is it that only some employees have shares?
Owning shares in the company for which you work has its attractions. And for MTL shareholders, the people who were employed by the company when it was privatised in 1992, it must be good news that share values have risen much faster than anyone expected. But there's a problem or two. The only time that a shareholder can get their money is when they leave and sell their shares to the company. And as share values rise, that's costing more and more money that could be used instead to buy new buses. And when the company needs to raise money, why is it only the banks who can profit from the investment? Why shouldn't some of that money come from shareholders who want an equal rate of return? And if MTL is an employee-owned company, what about all those employees who are not shareholders? Why shouldn't they have the chance to invest in their company's success? Ron Millington, Company Secretary.
New vehicles, we believe, are the basis of a quality service for the future so that the customer actually feels a pride in travelling with members of the MTL group. If we don't respond, if we don't give a quality service, we will have more competition in the marketplace, jobs will be threatened further, and the company will eventually just contract and die. It is not an option to stand still. Companies these days who are not going forward must be going backwards. They therefore must contract and eventually die. The problems are that the company has to provide the cash for people who are leaving the company. We've already paid out in excess of £400,000 to leavers over the last 2 years. And obviously, as time goes by and the share value increases, even more money will be paid out to people who are leaving the company.
But how would employees be able to buy shares?
We would make arrangements for people to be able to buy shares by not allowing the power of the wallet argument to reign supreme. We would have to arrange either soft loans or loans through the credit union or using banking facilities so that people would effectively pay for the shares, as it's known in the company, on the drip. We wouldn't be requiring people to put large blocks of money down on the table.
Certainly some staff at London Northern would like the opportunity to invest in the future of their company.
We're all here to earn money, as I say, and why should one half get shares and profits and the other half don't get anything at all? You know, it's fair, I think. And if the company does this, I think they'll get a response from the other drivers, and we all pull together and try to bring the company up to scratch.
It's a good incentive. If you, I mean, like in the newsletter there was about sickness and stuff like that. If people have got shares in the company, maybe they think twice. So yeah, it's a good idea. If you think you're going to have a piece of the company, your performance is going to be better, isn't it?
I think all the employees should have the opportunity to take a share in the company if they wish to. It seems a bit one-sided at the moment. But I don't see why we can't share in that part of things as well.
But some shareholders on Merseyside fear that they could lose if others were allowed to buy shares.
Oh, I appreciate that, yes, but I also appreciate that all these shares should be kept for Mersey-Bus employees, as they were from the beginning, should not be shared out amongst these satellite companies, which have been mentioned by the managing director, you know? At the end of the day, we're the ones who started the company.
We're buying outside of Merseyside, we're buying new companies, and perhaps after a time limit we can bring new shareholders into the company, loyal shareholders that are working for the company or MTL Holdings as it is.
There's talk of shares being sold to all employees, or an option to. There's a feeling within the current shareholders that they would like to retain possibly control of the shares. There's a great deal of objection to shares going to people that were ex-employees. There's a lot of emotional feeling involved in the issue of everybody being able to buy shares. Now, if there was a way of managing the system that the original shareholders maintained some control, but other employees were allowed to buy to raise capital, that might be a way the majority of people would go for.
Company Secretary Ron Millington is able to put many of these fears to rest.
The decision regarding what changes are to be made will be made by the shareholders. The process that we're trying to pursue is one of seeking consensus on the issues that the shareholders agree on, so that when we actually formulate the resolution and put the resolution to the shareholders, they are already aware of the issues, already aware of the problems, and therefore would support the changes. It is not in our interest to simply try and railroad something through that people are not prepared to accept. The shareholders ultimately must decide.
We'll be reporting on far less serious subjects in later editions. It might be football. Scousers claim to be the best, and they've the trophies to prove it, including the PSV Cup. Are you watching, Manchester? Do you need a life raft to get you going? We'll bring you that sort of action if you need a splashing sort of charity event. Perhaps you have news about sport of a much more gentle persuasion. What about fishing and national championships? Now, we couldn't resist the temptation of bringing home a spot of news that might shock the macho men in our garages. Someone from the supposedly weaker sex has been very effectively doing their job for the last 13 years.
Helen Clifford started as an apprentice with London Northern. Now, at Potter's Bar, she's a fully qualified engineering fitter who turns her hand to every job that's going.
No, I'll do just as good as them. Maybe a bit better, because you've got to worry about it, really. You've got to make sure that it's done properly. And, you know, full well, if anything happens, you know, people turn around and say, oh, it's just a woman. So we just get on really well. Total coming up to 13 years this August. I've been with London Northern, done all my training with them, driving. As it stands at the moment, I'm the only woman.
We'd like to hear about your hopes, your fears and expectations, not only in sport, but life in general. Get in touch by dropping a line to Chris Davis, our communications manager at Edge Lane. Well, I prepare to pop this one. Here's some news that might just help reduce the pressure.
Well, MTL Medical Services was originally MPTE. It was a medical section within MPTE. And during deregulation, it was obviously investigated to what was going to happen with this small medical department, which was originally just part of MPTE. Instead of deciding to fold the company up, it was decided to extend the services and offer occupational health services out to other groups. We have the clinic based here in Hatton Garden, where we are now, and we also have a clinic, our first satellite clinic, in fact, at Edge Lane, which is Clinic 4. So this unit here holds 3 clinics, and we have 1 clinic based in Edge Lane. We also have a health promotions team, and that's really our newest adventure, and this is very clear now that industry does need you to take health initiatives to their site. So we have a team of doctors and nurses that go to their own company site and conduct health initiatives within their own environment. They come here because they wish to take the health of their employees seriously. Sometimes it's legislative problems, that they have problems with COSH or the EC directives, and they wish to ensure their people are safe at work. And other times is they wish to have a corporate health initiative initiative, such as a well-person screening initiative, because I think it's been clearly identified now that if employers look after their employees, there is a far better likelihood of them staying healthy and safe at work.
While Dorothy makes sure that the whole operation runs smoothly, it's the job of Julie King, Customer Services Coordinator, to go out and sell the service.
Well, our customer base is varied and quite extensive in that any organisation, be it business, industry, commerce, has or can have some requirement for occupational health. At present, we look after approximately 86 companies across predominantly Merseyside but also the North West, mainly inclusive of Merseyside Fire Brigade, Mersey Regional Ambulance Service, chemical manufacturing industries, that type of thing. Our range of services is extensive and ranges from well-person screening, including full medical and nurse screening, to more extensive tests and medicals which are associated with occupational hazards, working environments, products and processes in use. Well, bus drivers, obviously, in talking about MTL, our parent company, have the full 5-star service from us. That's inclusive of occupational health surveillance for your engineers and your garage workers, through to your health screening for your 40+ and your management, right the way through to vaccinations, health promotion, first aid training, everything is the full service.
MTL Medical Services offer a direct way of reducing stress. Drivers face traffic congestion and truculent customers. Fitters have to keep the whole show on the road. Peter Coombs has to keep an eye on the future. Now, Anne, about that appointment, please.
There's always going to be competition. That's what business is about. I think that competition takes different forms. And I think we've been going through a period which people will look back to in a decade or so's time, while lots of relatively small companies scrabbled around, and those that got their act together started to emerge as bigger and more powerful organisations. And as that happens, and as we get a smaller number of companies generally owning most of the buses and operating most of the buses, I think the competition will start to take a different form. And that form will be more in terms of competing on terms of quality. I want us basically to keep our options as open as we can. I believe the way to do that is to prepare to float the company, because that's the most demanding thing to do. And if we do the most demanding thing, we'll make ourselves as strong as we can, both financially and in terms of size. And then if people at the time say, hang on a minute, we don't want to sell, we don't want to float, we just want to stay as we are, that actually provides the best opportunity for doing that. Because you don't have the opportunity to do that unless you are really competitive and really strong. If, on the other hand, they want to realise the value of the shares, and, you know, I've talked in terms of tens of thousands of pounds, not just the odd thousand of pounds, and you can't realise that sort of money if you stay private. So if they actually want that sum of money and the company's worth that sort of sum, we're going to have to sell or float. We'll be ready to float because we've prepared for it. And if we can get more money selling and that's a better way, then we'll sell the company instead.
Well, I'll tell you, I've learned a great deal on this trip, and I hope you have too. I certainly hope we've covered some areas of critical concern and that we've left enough room for further discussions in later editions. In the meantime, I look forward to seeing you again. Goodbye.